Because understanding great literature is better than trying to read and understand yet another business book. On the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, we commit to reading, dissecting, and analyzing what we believe are the great books of the Western canon. You know, those books, from those authored by Jane Austen to plays authored by Shakespeare, and everything else in between, that you might have fallen asleep trying to read in high school. We do this for our listeners, the small business owner, the entrepreneur, the manager, or the civic leader who doesn't have the time to read, dissect, analyze, and even leverage insights from great literature to execute leadership best practices in the confusing and chaotic postmodern world we all now inhabit. Welcome to the restoration of the best of Western civilization here at the intersection of literature and leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. Hello, my name is Jesan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, episode number 182. Reading directly from our book today. Ladies and gentlemen, I have traveled over just about half our state to get here this evening. I couldn't get away sooner because my new well was coming in at Lobos River and I had to see about it. That well is now flowing 4,000 barrel and paying me an income of $5,000 a day. I've got 2 others drilling and I've got 16 producing at Antelope. So ladies and gentlemen, if I say I'm an oil man, I'm an oil man. You've got a great chance here, ladies and gentlemen, but bear in mind, you can lose it all if you ain't careful. Out of all the fellers that beg you for a chance to drill your land, maybe 1 in 20 will be oil men. The rest will be speculators, fellers trying to get in between you and the oil. Oil men to get some of that money that ought by rights come to you. Even if you find one that has money and means to drill, he'll maybe know nothing about drilling and have to hire out the job on contract. And then you're depending on a contractor that's trying to rush the job through so as to get another contract just as quick as he can. But ladies and gentlemen, I do my own drilling, and the fellers that work for me are fellers I know. I make it my business to be there and to see their work. I don't lose my tools in the hole and spend months efficient. I don't botch the cementing off and let water into the hole and ruin the whole lease. And let me tell you, I'm fixed right now like no other man or company in this field because my Lobos River well has just come in. I got a string of tools all ready to put to work. I can load a rig onto trucks and have them here in a week. I've got business connections so I can get the lumber for the derrick. Such things go by friendship in a rush like this. That's why I can guarantee to start drilling and put up the cash to back my word. I assure you, whatever the others promise to do, when it comes to the showdown, they won't be there. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not up to me to say how you're going to divide up the royalty, but let me say this. Whatever you give up so as to get together, it'll be small compared to what you may lose by delay and by falling into the hands of gamblers and crooks. Ladies and gentlemen, take it from me as an oil man, there ain't going to be many gushers here at Prospect Hill. The pressure under the ground will soon let up, and it'll be them that get their wells down first that'll get the oil. A field plays out very quick. In 2 or 3 years, you'll see all these here wells on the pump. Yes, even this discovery well that's got you all crazy. So take my word for it, and don't break up this lease. Take a smaller share of the royalty if you must, and I'll see that it's a small share of a big royalty so you won't lose in real money. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what I have to say. No one likes to talk about work. At least not in real terms, right? When we talk about work, of course, we tend to glamorize work. We tend to talk about the grind or the hustle, which, of course, you can find all about by looking it up on Instagram or TikTok, you know, next to videos of Kobe Bryant talking about how much work he put in as an athlete or, well, some other football star, or hockey star, or sports star of your choice. But the real work, the work of showing up every day, the work of grinding every day on things that you may not like. Work is a part of growth that we don't talk about because it isn't glamorous. And if you fail at work, your status declines in other people's eyes. I think of many people in my own life who have worked very, very hard and earned absolutely, well, maybe not absolutely, almost nothing. But then I think of the people on the flip side or on the other side of the continuum who seemed to have done almost no work at all and fell inevitably ass backwards into success. What warms my heart at the end of the day is that no growth comes without friction. And friction comes from work. And putting in the work without applause or recognition or even acknowledgement, that is what creates quality. Quality in writing, quality in acting, quality in athletics, and even quality in the topic that we are going to talk about today, quality in entrepreneurship. We don't talk too much about entrepreneurship on this show, and it's kind of weird. We've done 400 and some odd episodes, and we'll talk here and there about it when it pops up, but directly talking about the entrepreneur, directly talking about the work that the entrepreneur puts in, we haven't really focused on that. But today on the show, we're going to do that. We're going to drill our way deep down through the exegesis of entrepreneurship and what that actually means in putting in the work so that other people can come along and work with you. We're going to do that today by framing the work in terms of the first 100 or so pages of our book today, Oil by Upton Sinclair, the basis of the 2007 motion picture with that monster actor, Daniel Day-Lewis, There Will Be Blood. Leaders, the work of leadership we should be doing in public, and everyone should see us doing it, with all of its potential for failure, heartache, grief, and even recrimination. We could either do it gladly or we could do it sadly, but we have to do it publicly. And back to discuss insights on entrepreneurship, even though I did not give him notes for today, so he's going to do this by the seat of his pants, is my old friend.
Off the cuff.
Off the cuff and very hush-hush. No, he's going to do it out loud as usual. Is my good friend, Tom Libby. How you doing today, Tom?
I am living my best life, my friend. I am loving it.
Every time. Every time he's living his best life. Every time.
Well, because I can't live anybody else's.
So. Well, exactly. Yeah, they won't let you. They won't let you live that life.
Although I recently watched a movie. It went slightly under the radar. Keanu Reeves just came out with a movie with Seth Rogen and Aziz Ansari called Good Fortune.
Okay.
And it's basically about a rich guy, poor guy swapping, the Freaky Friday thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like
trading places.
Stuff. Trading places. Really low key, kind of good. It was actually a decent movie because
Good.
To your point, like you can't live anybody else's. Well, these guys switched places and they were living it. And the whole point was to show the other person, like, okay, so take the poor guy, put him in the rich guy's shoes, and then basically tell the poor guy that he's missing out by not being the poor guy anymore. And Aziz Ansari went, go F yourself. I'm staying right where I am. I love this now. I love this life. It was really funny. Anyway, but
I'm not changing places.
It was low key. It was low key pretty good.
Good deal. I'm glad to hear that like Keanu Reeves is actually like, doing work outside of, John Wick, 12 or whatever the hell.
It's back to his roots too, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think about where he came from, he wasn't an action star first. He was Bill and Ted. It's like, come on.
Everybody forgets about Bill and Ted. Everybody does. Everybody forgets about Bill and Ted.
This was closer to his roots, closer to the beginning of his career than the
Good.
The Matrix and John Wick thing. That was great. And don't get me wrong, Keanu Reeves is Keanu Reeves. He's awesome. But, but the beginning stuff, him being funny, in my opinion, is when he's at his best. He's at his best when he's being funny.
Well, speaking of actors who are at their best, Daniel
Daniel
Day-Lewis. I opened
Day-Lewis.
up with that. I opened up with that entire speech there, which is the opening of There Will Be Blood, from 2007, directed by one of my favorite modern directors, Paul Thomas Anderson. I put him up there with Christopher Nolan, who we talked about on the show. He's coming out with the Odyssey this year, and the last movie, of course, that I saw with him was Oppenheimer. But I always watch whatever it is that Paul Thomas Anderson does. Ever since he did the that great ensemble piece in the 1990s, Magnolia. That's when I sort of stumbled onto him. I know he had done Boogie Nights beforehand. I watched Boogie Nights years afterward, but Boogie Nights, Magnolia, There Will Be Blood. These are, I mean, he seems to have this ability to take on landmark films and to pull something out of actors. And Daniel Day-Lewis always brings it. He never mails it in. He's never sort of just hanging around. I mean, we're talking about before we were recording Gangs of New York, which you did not necessarily particularly care for. But you did like Daniel Day-Lewis's acting in that, character in that.
I thought he was fantastic. He was the best part of the movie, in my opinion. He was
Yeah.
absolutely him on screen was worth watching. I
Right.
thought the rest of the movie kind of fell apart without him.
Well, and the thing that, well, I agree. There's all kinds of third act problems
Yes,
in
yes.
Gangs in New York that we don't need to get into right now because that's not the focus of the show. But There Will Be Blood. And I know it's been a while since you've seen it, so you may not necessarily remember all the specifics of it. But it is about the oil man J. Arnold Ross, and about his his entrepreneurial journey, all the way from being a guy who starts out, and There Will Be Blood opens not with that speech, but it opens with the music opens, and it goes, it's not even music, it's a sound effect, and then you're in like the Nevada desert, and Daniel Day-Lewis is in a hole, using a pickaxe to pull silver out of the ground to establish a silver mine. And there's no dialogue, there's no music, it's just the sound of the pickaxe and him pulling dirt out of the hole. And the opening goes on for 5 minutes, 7 minutes. He's digging, he's pulling, he's digging, he's pulling, and he thinks he's got it. He finds a piece of silver, right? And I can't remember all the specific details because it's been a little bit of a minute, but his tools fall down the hole. And so, of course, he goes down into the hole to pull out his tools. He slips, falls back into the hole, breaks his leg. Again, no sound. Drags himself out of the hole, drags his silver find back to town. And the next scene that you see is them staking his claim and basically saying, yeah, you can pull silver out of here. And that's the first introduction we get to J. Arnold Ross. Every time I watch this movie, and it's been a little bit, I should have refreshed and watched it beforehand. And it's a good use of your time if you haven't watched it. And I'll talk about Upton Sinclair in a minute, and I'll talk about oil. Every time I watch this movie, I think finally a director has actually captured exactly what entrepreneurship is like and put it on screen.
I was just gonna say that one scene is basically it.
That's the whole thing.
Just that one scene. Never mind the rest. Never mind the rest of the two. I think the movie had 2 hours and 40 minutes or something like that.
It's a monster. Yeah,
it's a long movie. But so take the rest of the 2.5 hours out of it. That 10 minutes is entrepreneurship all by itself. Work your ass off, fall down, break a leg, drag yourself up. It's like that's entrepreneurship in a nutshell, right there.
And it gets to this idea because Paul Thomas Anderson, as a director and as a writer, right? Because I think he wrote and directed the film, or co-wrote and directed the film, if I remember correctly. He's part of a line that goes back to Upton Sinclair himself, right? And there's a lot of things going on in the book Oil. But Sinclair was, I'll just read directly from his Wikipedia page for those of you who maybe haven't listened to the Shorts episode that precedes this, or we talk a little bit about Sinclair and his writing. He was born September 20th, 1878, and he died November 25th, 1968. He was an American author, a muckraker journalist, and a political activist. And interestingly enough, he was the 1934 Democratic Party nominee for governor of California. He wrote nearly 100 books and other works in several genres. Sinclair's work was well known and popular in the first half of the 20th century, and he won the 1943 Pulitzer Prize for fiction. His first book was The Jungle, which talked about the U.S. meatpacking industry in Chicago. And when he published that book in 1906, it caused a public uproar that contributed in part to the passage a few months later of the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. In 1919, he published The Brass Check, a muckraking expose of American journalism that publicized the issue of journalistic malpractice in the United States. 4 years after the publication of The Brass Check, the first code of ethics for journalists was created. Time magazine called him, quote, a man with every gift except humor and silence, based on his wife Mary Peg Sinclair's book, Southern Belle, a personal story of a crusader's wife. He also is well remembered for the quote, I love this one, quote, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding. He was a deeply socialist progressive during a time in America. Tom and I were just talking about this as well. During a time in America where socialism wasn't a boogeyman because in the West, we did not know, not only did we not know, we did not have accurate reporting on exactly what was going on inside of Stalin's Russia. We also had the Great Depression on during the time of much of Sinclair's writing and World War II. Now, what is modern progressivism back in the day would have just been called social reform. They didn't use the term social justice. They used the term social reform. And Sinclair was a social reformer. And he used his talents, he used his ability to write and turn a phrase to critique and reform the society around him. He had a vision for a better world, and he used his talents to try to bring that world into reality, right? He wanted to convert his readers and his fans from a constrained vision of tragic trade-offs, right, in a world that just was. Like if you just worked at a meatpacking plant, well, it just is. Or if you're a journalist, it just is. Or in the case of oil, if you're an oil man or a landman, you're part of a system that just is, and you just operate in the system, and there's no way for you to sort of reform it. Sinclair didn't believe that, and he didn't write from that position. He believed in an unconstrained vision and creating entertainment out of the paradoxes of human nature. So one of the things you see in oil is that J. Arnold Ross, well, he is an oil man and a landman, and he is, for lack of a better term, portrayed as being greedy and venal. His son is portrayed as being a social reformer, basically rejecting all of that venality and greed and seeing and being able to see through his father's hypocrisy, such as it were, in order to create a new world. Now, those things are very interesting about Sinclair, and that frames sort of the book. I opened up with a differing perspective because, unlike Paul Thomas Anderson, well, no, let me frame it this. Let me do the different framing. I think that being a movie director inside of the Hollywood system is about as close as you can come to being an entrepreneur inside of a system, in any modern system that we have. Because think about what a director has to do, right? They've got to obviously arrange for things to be on set. They have to make sure the writing is clear. They have to make sure the storyboards are correct. They have to make sure the actors hit their lines. They have to have good relationships with the actors, all of the members of the crew, everyone from the grip to the caterers. They also have to have good relationships with the financiers and the money men who will come by and have an opinion because they're giving money. Case in point, a meeting that we had this morning, Tom and I, on another project that we're involved in, right? Money men are going to have an opinion. And the director sits, even more so than the cinematographer who just points the camera, well, not just, but points the camera and makes sure the shot is good. or the writer who writes the words that the actors say. Heck, even more so than the actors themselves, who quite frankly are puppets on a string, if we're really going to be direct about this. Some puppets are just better than others. Um, the director is the guy who has to have the vision and keep all of those people on the straight line towards the vision. And if he deviates even just a little bit, if he's allowed to be distracted by the money men or by the actors or by the situations that will surround him on the set, if he deviates even just a little bit from that, you don't get a masterpiece. You don't get quality. You don't get excellence. Heck, you don't even get a mediocre product. I think of the movie that came out this week. Maggie Gyllenhaal directed Bride, and it was a $100 million movie, and I think it grossed $9 million. Brutal.
It didn't look exciting to me either. We talk about we're both pretty good movie, but we're
Yeah.
movie people, and I watched the trailer and I went, no, what are we doing? Like, I'm sorry, I just didn't get it. And now, by the way, the original Bride of Frankenstein, great movie. That was a great movie, by the way. So it's
I,
not
you
the.
know,
It was just this. I didn't get it. But back to your analogy here, though. So and
yes, back to the
pulling this
analogy.
pulling this back to entrepreneurship. If you think of that, so the director in your analogy is the startup founder, and
Mm-hmm.
keeping that North Star to their mission and what their plan is and what they're trying to build can very easily get distracted by the developers that are producing the software. Let's just say on the left-hand side, you've got a whole slew of operational things, whether they're developers, your first hire, hiring the right team, et cetera, et cetera. On the right hand side, you got all the money people, right? So the VCs and the angels that once they give you their money, they want to have an opinion. So, to your analogy there, it's interesting to me that you chose the movies, and the director is basically the startup founder. The director is
Right.
that person that's supposed to have the North Star, that's supposed to have the steering compass to
Mm-hmm.
steer the startup. In the movies, it is the director. So that, like, to your point, it's the closest to entrepreneurship in the movie industry is that director. I agree with that. I didn't really put those two and two together, but it's a good analogy.
So I look at directors like and we're not going to talk all about directors this episode, but we're going to talk more about entrepreneurs. We're going to sort of lean into that, and I want to talk about the work too. I want to tie it into what I said there in the opening, because I think there's something valuable. Not something. There is something valuable there.
100%.
But I think of directors like directors I particularly care for, and directors who have been acknowledged as creatives who produce something of quality. Right? They all had the ability, and I'm going to name five of them. Right? Actually, I'm going to name three more, because I already named Paul Thomas Anderson and I named Christopher Nolan. I'm going to name three other ones. Okay. All five of these men, quite frankly, no, I'll throw a woman in there actually, um, had strength of vision, to your point, and they had strength of singular vision. So huh, the man at the top of that mountain was Orson Welles. I mean, he created Citizen Kane at what, like the age of like 26?
Yeah.
That's nuts. By the way, Michelangelo also created the David at like, 20 some odd years old. So like, genius in youth is not, just limited to like
You're telling me that Mark Zuckerberg
movies.
wasn't the first child genius to exist?
It's been done before, Mark, and by individuals who, anyway, it doesn't matter. I won't go down that road. Don't you tempt me. So you got Orson Welles. Then you have, of course, the great British master. I have two Britishers on this list. Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh yeah,
I
for sure.
mean, please, from the silent films that he directed in the 20s and 30s. Or no, sorry, not 20s and 30s, in the 40s and 50s, and then the remakes that he did in the 60s and later on into the 70s. The man was just ridiculous. So you've got Orson Welles, you've got Alfred Hitchcock, and I said I was going to throw a woman on there because I'm not gender specific here. Catherine Bigelow, The Hurt Locker, Point Break. I mean, those are singularly visionary films. And then, of course, Christopher Nolan, like I said, Paul Thomas Anderson. Those are 5 directors I can name just off the top of my brain. And I know that our listeners can name more where they had that vision and they drove the vision. Sometimes I think of Stanley Kubrick, actually, a man,
Okay.
by the way, whose vision I could not understand on most of his movies. I just could not. But I cannot deny that he had a vision.
Yeah.
He absolutely did. It's just one I didn't understand.
The interesting thing too here is, if again pulling it back to entrepreneurship, the film directors and entrepreneurs are very similar in this respect as well. If you've done it once and you've made a lot of money at it, you are less likely to get those left, right side influences trying to change your vision if you've already
Yes.
been there, done that. So,
Yes.
second time entrepreneurs, third time entrepreneurs, when you hear people talk about having 2 or 3 successful exits and they want to start another company, I mean, funders will just throw money at them because they think
Oh,
that
yeah.
if they've been successful 3 times already, it's like the same thing with the film, right? Like, so Christopher Nolan, now don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say I'm in love with every movie he's ever done, but the fact of the matter is, most of them produce a lot of money. Like, let's just be realistic. With his name on it alone, even the bad movies that he has made have made a lot of money because his name's on it. So
Yep.
it's like, but the entrepreneurship journey is very similar in that respect as well. Like, a first time founder is very hard to get money. I hate to tell you guys this, but
It is.
statistically speaking, it is now in the current landscape less than 1% of companies that start actually get significant funding. I'm not talking about your uncle or your grandparents that give you a couple $100,000. I'm talking about significant influential money, anything over 7 figures. It's less than 1%. But if you've done this and you've exited once or twice, let's say twice, and now you're starting a new company when you got this new idea, you are not 1% chance of getting money. That
Mm-mm.
that it, in, exponentially grows. Like, you're talking probably a 50-50 shot on whether you get money, which is unheard of in the startup world. But those filmmakers are the same way. My only part to this tangent of
Mm-hmm.
this
No, you're right. Yeah, yeah, this
there
jog we're doing around the block. Yeah.
yeah, there's a direct correlation, I guess, is my
There
my
is.
point.
There is. Well, and it's not just on the money and on the exits, which is a good point. It's also on the work.
Yeah.
So I had a meeting today with somebody where I said to them, and this person probably in their late 20s, and after I said it, he was like, I've never actually heard that before. I said, I said to him, advice is easy. Getting money, or no, getting money is easy. Getting a good advice and acting on it is hard. And he didn't understand that. He's like, that's, oh, okay, that's interesting position. I think there are a lot of people who would disagree with you on that. And I said, that's fine. They could disagree with me on it, but it's true. Getting money is easy. Getting good advice, notice I said good, not bad, good advice and acting on it is hard. And the reason why it's hard is because we forget about the part that unites the advice to the money, and that's the work.
Yeah.
Work is hard. And so I already sort of went on my tangent about that. What is the important part of work? This is my question in red. Yeah, which you would have seen it if I sent you the notes today. What is the important part of work? In getting an idea from napkin to reality that we don't talk about as leaders.
Good Lord, there's probably 100 different, like, cliche comments that people make here, right? That are
I
either
know.
all of them are true, and at the same time, like, we don't understand how to put them into practice, right? Like, for example, and we the one of the conversations that we had this morning, you and I had a brief conversation. I won't bring up but it was a brief conversation about but so about this particular comment, which is, don't let perfection get in the way of good enough, right? Like,
Right.
so, like, but what, like, so you can say that to a startup founder, and that's good advice, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But acting on that good advice is not that easy because
No.
it still leaves too much up to the interpretation, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so what is good enough to you and good enough to me may be very different. So it
Yep.
goes back to your point about the founder's vision. In reaching for that vision, it's like, well, it's very difficult. So again, my kind of like, there's a lot of cliche things in here. What I will say is this: the biggest problem, in my opinion, about people starting businesses today is this, and I'm going to use the word ridiculous, people, and I'll explain in a minute what I mean by this. The ridiculous notion of work-life balance. You will never start your own company to work less. That just doesn't happen. And if you think you're going to, then you're insane to start with, right? Like,
Yeah.
so when you're talking about like what is the work that needs to be done, the idea, listen, and I know you've started companies in the past. Hey, so I've started companies in the past. I remember the very first company I ever started. I didn't take a solid day off, not a solid day, meaning I didn't look at an email. I didn't look at social media. I didn't look at anything. I didn't think about the company. I didn't think about it for a whole day, one day. Not once in the first probably 2 years of the company. Now, did that mean that I worked 24/7? No. What it means is on a Saturday when I was supposed to be with my family, an email would come in and I would tell them, I'm really sorry, but I have to address this. Give me 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it was only 5 minutes of work on that day, but I'm telling you, every single day for 2 years, there wasn't a single day that I took off to get that company off the ground. Now, I successfully exited that company about 5 or 6 years ago now and started another company and started from square one, just started doing it all over again. But the point I think that people misunderstand. I think that that statement of work-life balance, I want to find work-life balance. I want work-life balance. I think people misunderstand what that term means. Or let me rephrase. My definition of that is very different than most people's. I'll put it that way. To me, work-life balance is not a 50-50 amount of day and time that you work versus not work, or no. To me, work-life balance just means one of two things that you accomplish. Sometimes it's both, but one of two things. What you do for work aligns with the person that you are so well that they just kind of blend in, and you're not worried about how many hours of the day you're working. It's just kind of like it is what it is, right? Like I just
Mm-hmm.
said, like, and even now at this point, if I have to interrupt my wife's, I'm at a christening with my wife. If I tell her I have to excuse myself, she knows it's really important. That's
Mm-hmm.
balance. If it's a run-of-the-mill email, I don't care. But if it's something that like is unbelievable, earth-shattering, like emergency, I will still take the time out of my day to answer it on a Saturday or a Sunday or in the evening or whatever. It doesn't matter. Because to me, that balance is, if I lose that client, then my work sucks. Like, and I'm not willing to lose that balance of work. So it's that allowing what you do to marry and match who you are as a person, that's balance. Or the other side of it is that when you are at work, you are focused on work and your personal life does not interrupt you as much as when you are in your personal life, you don't allow your work to interrupt you. That's balance. Now, whether you work 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day is irrelevant. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being in the moment and working through whatever's in front of you and not allowing interruptions so that you can actually focus on it. That's balance. And when you allow that balance, when what creates the balance is when you allow it to happen on both sides of the coin. So again, that scenario, like when you are with your family, you are with your family. You do not allow your work to interrupt that. When you're at work, you're at work. Now, again, in both cases, emergencies are emergencies. You can't, there's nothing you can do about that. There are going to be times where you interrupt one of those things because it's just absolute necessity. That does not mean you don't have balance. That just means that you have an order of importance in your life. And I think from an entrepreneur standpoint, that's where I think they start to fail in today's world. That order of importance and misunderstanding what work-life balance is the surefire way to failure, in my opinion.
Are you ready to elevate your leadership journey through exploring the wisdom of the ages? Subscribe to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast on all major podcast platforms, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube Music. You can also find us everywhere else podcasts are available. If you find value in our episodes, please leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. We need those reviews to grow, and it is truly the easiest way to help other leaders and lovers of literature discover this show. And thank you for your support. So I think two things. One, the idea of work-life balance is the way you're talking about it, the way it's conceptualized, not what you have defined. The way the popular culture conceptualizes work-life balance is a direct outgrowth of the work of Upton Sinclair and the other social reformers of the 20s and 30s, who looked at work through the lens of a society that was transitioning from being primarily farming to being primarily manufacturing, where the manufacturing conditions and the industry conditions were demonstrably worse than what would have been on the farm. Mm. And then the social reformers failed, the progressive social reformers failed to update their software when the transition was made post-World War II from a manufacturing society to a mostly white-collar working society, where work shifts from being a physical thing to being a mental and emotional thing. Hmm. And the only update the social reformers had was the popular conception of work-life balance, because work looks different when it is emotional or intellectual versus when it is physical. That's right. So, case in point, right? The Jungle. The Jungle was written about meatpacking plants. I lived in Chicago for about 5 seconds when I was in my early teenage years, long enough to remember it and long enough to talk about it and long enough to forget it, except when it comes up in examples like this. And when you would drive through, and they still had slaughterhouses in Chicago back in the early 90s, like that whole culture hadn't yet sort of all completely transitioned over. And you could, if you were stuck in traffic on certain parts of the expressway, whichever one it was, I can't remember, you would smell the slaughterhouses and the meatpacking plants. You could smell them driving by the highway. When I went to high school in northern Louisiana, at that time in northern Louisiana, there were paper mills all over the place, and you could smell paper mills. Oh God, it's horrible. God, it's horrible.
I'd rather drive through a fertilizer, like cow manure than a paper mill.
Closing the loop on a previous conversation that we've had. Okay, now we're talking about manure again. This is great. But these are the kinds of jobs, whether it's a fertilizer plant, a paper making mill, or a meat packing plant, where the work that is being done is physical and messy and smelly and for many people disgusting. They associate that with work. No one associates, for good or ill, no one until recently, and by recently I mean within the last 30 years in our culture, associates the white collar effort of being mentally and emotionally focused on making a decision either in a startup environment or a white collar corporate environment or a white collar medium-sized business environment. Nobody associates that with work. Most people throughout the history of the 20th century associated that with ease, because that was the bourgeois class. That was the capitalist class. Those were the folks that Sinclair was writing against. Those were the owners. They were, and this is how he frames J. Arnold Ross. He frames him as an owner, but he frames him as an owner who is willing to get down in the dirt, but he's working really hard to make sure his son doesn't have to get down in the dirt. And Sinclair critiques this in Oil, using the son to critique the assumptions of the father and to call out the father and say, to your point about work, how dare you not have work-life balance? How dare you not this and how dare you not that? Which is, of course, is the lament of every child whose father works, 24/7, 365. and doesn't see them. I was talking with my wife, totally different context, but it applies here. Told her my wife about liquor stores the other day, right? You would think that owning a liquor store would be an easy kind of retail thing to do. Uh, I would, I'm going to go on record right now. I would never, and never's a long time, never want to own a liquor store. I don't want to be a part of a liquor store. Don't come to me with any ideas about liquor stores. No, distilleries, distribution, that's a different thing. But the actual retail store itself, the reason owning a liquor store is hard is because everyone's trying to rip you off from the people who are doing the customer service to your customers, to your distributors, to the landlord. You have to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week
Don't
to make
forget the
sure
government.
the government. Oh, and I haven't even talked about the government and taxes yet. I haven't gotten into that yet, right? Just the people on the ground trying to rip you off. Forget the other people like 3 levels up trying to rip you off. And guess what? And by the way, the government, if you do anything wrong with like the stamps on the liquor, oh, forget it. Your life is over, right? And you know how I know this? Because Gary Vaynerchuk, who is the son of, I believe, a Russian Jewish immigrant, talked about how when his parents came over, he never saw his father until he was in his 20s because his father owned a liquor store. And coming over from what was terrible conditions in Eastern Europe or in Russia, wherever the Vaynerchuks came out of, coming here, work in a liquor store looked like paradise in comparison to what they came from and emigrated from. Work. This is the thing. We have to change our conceptions around work. So I'm supporting your point around work-life balance, but I also think we have, and I think we have to take into consideration that we have to reconceptualize what work actually is, which is part of our struggle that we're having right now.
No, and I agree. And we both have children in their 20s, and that's another fight.
Oh yeah.
That's, I mean, the whole idea
Yeah.
so without giving away too much and without talking too deeply about whatever. So we have a very large house, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
my house is
Yeah.
about 5,000 square feet. This disillusion that they're delusional in thinking my kids. I'm not saying everybody's kids.
Yeah.
My kids are delusional in thinking that they should be afforded the ability to go work 40 hours a week and live the way they want to live or the way that they were accustomed to living in my house. So, 3 acres of land, 5,000 square feet, 3, 4 cars in the driveway. When they turn 16, they could just take the car whenever they want, like whatever, right? They want to work 40 hours a week and live the way they want to live. And I keep trying to explain to them, you can't start like that. Like you want
Right.
to run like Usain Bolt when you haven't even learned how to crawl yet. Like when I came into the workforce, I had to work 2 jobs, and they always have this like they always try to get very analytical on me and talk about how inflation is like is their salaries are not keeping up with inflation, et cetera, right? Whatever. And that might be true. I don't really care, to be honest with you. I don't care because I don't care that my first apartment that I ever rented was only $450 a month. I made $3.25 an hour. And I understand that that math may not math for my kids, but I remember when I lived on my own, very first time I lived on my own, I had to work 2 jobs. So
Mm-hmm.
the idea of work-life balance to me at that time was just simply I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have to live at my parents' house anymore. I was happy. The balance to me was
There you go.
living on my own, working 75 hours a week. Didn't matter. I lived on my own.
Didn't matter.
That's the
Yeah.
balance was. There was always like a give and take, right?
Yeah.
Balance is about give and take. They don't understand that today. So when I tell my kids, like, well, if you want to earn more money, just go get a second job. I shouldn't have to do that. I should be allowed to work. Well, why? Because I can work 40 hours a week and afford well, I've got 30 years of experience behind me. I've scrubbed the toilets. I've wiped the floors and picked up kids' puke off the bathroom floor. Like, what are you talking about? Like you, to your point about the whole difference between white collar and like, so let me get this straight. You want to walk in the door at you have a psychology degree. You want to walk in the
Hmm.
door as the director of HR with never having HR
Yes.
experience
Yes. That's
and
exactly it. Yes.
make 140,000 or $150,000 a year? No, it doesn't work that way. You have to earn that. You have to
Right.
go work your ass off to earn that. You have to go scrub toilets if that whatever the equivalent, and I apologize for HR professionals here. That's not my intent is not to crap on HR. It was just the one that popped into my head because of the psychology degree that she has. Anyway, but like whatever the equivalent to that is, you have to take that 50, $60,000 a year job. Maybe it's 40, I don't know. You need experience before you can demand those salaries. But because we put so much emphasis on higher education and the fact that when we were coming out of higher education, the jobs were
Hmm.
better for people who had that degree. No
Hmm.
doubt.
No doubt.
When I graduated high school, at the time I graduated high school, the workforce was probably closer to 70-30 of college degrees. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
about 30%, and it was going up. It was definitely on the upward swing. By the time I was about in my early 30s, it was probably closer to about 40-45% of jobs that required degrees. Now it's much higher than that. So guess what happens to you, the value of your college degree now that 90% of the jobs out there require college degrees. The value of that college degree goes down, not up,
Right.
down, which
Yep.
means that now they can offer that $40,000 a year job to the college graduate instead of the person who never went to college.
Well, and this is, and
But
this is,
they don't get that.
they
They
don't get
they
that.
they
Yeah.
want $100,000 out the gate. Well, because we just told them that a $200,000 education is going to be worth it for them.
Well, and this, and
It's
the thing we,
insane.
well, and the thing we also don't consider is, human nature in this, right? So one of the things that Sinclair does really, really well in his book, right, is he describes and defines human nature, right? So whether it's Bunny's nature, whether it's the nature, which is the sun, if it's the nature of the dad, right, J. Arnold Ross, or if it's the nature of, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this because this gets directly to what you're talking about here, the society, right, that is consumed with this new product, right, this new thing called oil, which we forget. In the early 20th century, oil drilling in and of itself was as dangerous and no more dangerous and harder than mining because people have been mining for
Millennia.
thousands of years by the point the 20th century showed up by that point. But oil was a totally new thing, totally new product, pulling it up out of the ground, refining it, which no one ever talks about refining. We have this, we talked about the show Landman. We have this idea that it's just, oh, you go, you find a spot in the ground, you drill it, boom, like there's oil that pops up. Now, that's no longer the case. We now have fracking and a whole bunch of other processes that exist. And by the way, the reason I know about all this, ladies and gentlemen, is because I live in Texas. And I'm going to talk about my dealings with landmen in a minute. I've dealt with landmen. I've dealt with guys like J. Arnold Ross. I've dealt with these guys. And so we forget that in the early 20th century, wildcatting, making bets on wells, making bets on this new commodity, all of the speculation, all of that existed that Sinclair critiques, all of that existed because there were people who were, to your point about education, who were what we would consider to be poorly educated people who were looking for a way to get rich. How? Not slow, but get rich quick. Mm. And they wanted their kids, to Tom's point about his children, they wanted their kids to get rich quick. So their kids could be in a better spot.
No, I want them to work their ass off.
Right. Exactly. I want 100 years later, we're like, no, you got to go to work. You got to go get a job. Well, so like with my children, I will say this. My children have been raised with the principle of work, right? So small case of this. My wife and I have gone off and on like allowances, right, with kids, right? Yeah. And when we're off, we're really off. And when we're on, it's in a spurt, kind of like an oil well, and then we're back off again. We can't. And it's not that we disagree on it. It's just that our minds shift and change based on, whatever happens to be going on. And so we were having a conversation, gosh, probably about a month ago about this with our youngest kid. And he's 9, and he's gotten to the point where he could start doing work, right? And I don't mean work like chores. So for us in our family, chores are, particularly for younger children, I always used to tell my kids, chores are preparation for you going out working in the real world.
Yeah.
Your pay is that you get to live here. That's the pay. your compensation is that you get to feel good about having a clean room or a clean kitchen or a clean whatever, right? A clean bowl and plate. That's your compensation, right? And let me tell you, when I was a kid, it was framed in a lot harder terms for me. My father was old school blue collar. So it wasn't, do this and I'll pay you, or do this chore and you can complain. It was, no, shut up and wash the dishes. Or, are you going to get something and you're not going to like it? Oh, you're right, sir. Yes, sir. All right. May I go over there and dry that dish? Yes, thank you. And my mother was the same way. So let's be clear. It wasn't just my father. Okay. And so the principle of work, but not tied to compensation, right? Not tied to material compensation, is something that I've tried to pass on to my children, because at the end of the day, our children are going to, like your 20-year-old daughter. I've got a 20-year-old daughter. I got another daughter who's in her, she's getting ready to be 16 here in about a spit of a minute. And my 9-year-old boy, and then my oldest son is he's in his late 20s. He's already in the work world, thank God, and doing the work. My 20-year-old is transitioning into the work world and is putting in the effort of doing the work. Because what I think the next thing is, particularly with our LLMs and all of that, is that the ways to get money have become so easy that people think the work should be easy too. Mm. And I take the position that Dana White takes of the UFC. He's been quoted. I see this quote all over Instagram, and he's right. Somebody talked to him in an interview and he said, he tells his kids kind of the same way I tell my kids, all you have to do is just be a little bit better than the next person, because everybody's just so, he uses the term weak. I don't use that term. Everybody's so flat. They want everything so easy. All you have to do is just work a little bit harder, just a little bit, and you will just be a monster. So I'm raising monsters. I'm raising them not to be a little bit harder, but to work a lot harder, because the compensation level between the people who've chosen to not do the work or who just want it handed to them, the gap between them and the people who are just willing to put in this massive amount of work, that compensation gap is going to be huge. It's just going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's just going to get bigger and bigger as our digital tools continue to delude us into this idea that work is something that just doesn't matter.
Well, the digital tools are commoditizing it.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
Essentially, yeah. We're commoditizing entry-level work.
Right.
That's what we're doing. So to your point, so the work harder, etc. But it's not just about, to your point a few minutes ago, it's not just about the physical work harder. You have to mentally work harder. You have to be when you tell your kids you have to be better than everybody else, you're not talking about, I used Usain Bolt a few minutes ago as the reference. So again, you're not telling them that you have to go beat Usain Bolt in a race.
No.
But my kid being the wise guy that he is, he'll be like, I'll beat Usain Bolt in a race any day and twice on Sunday. He can run all he wants. I'm getting in my car. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so to your point, it doesn't always have to be the physicality of it. You just have to be better. You have to be better than the next guy or girl, whichever.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the creativity of being better is going to really accelerate people, because again, to your point, can it be physically better? Absolutely. Of course, you can be physically better. I spent the first 10 years of my career in a restaurant, and my knife skills were better than most people's. I could fly by people with knife skills. Not today, by the way, just so you know, not today. But like, I haven't done it in a long time. But it's, so there are physical skills like that, sure. But if there are also mental skills, there are not just mental, but there's there's creative skills, there's like the ability to uh problem solving
Hmm.
skills. If you are better at any one of those than the next person, you'll accelerate. You'll
You'll
accelerate
accelerate.
your and by the way, getting back to the entrepreneurial conversation, that's half of entrepreneurship right there, is figuring out the better mousetrap or the new mousetrap or the faster mouse, whatever, bigger, better, faster, stronger, smarter, whatever that is. That's the entrepreneurial journey. You just have to decide whether you're doing it for someone else or for yourself.
So let me ask you this question. What is the scariest thing about entrepreneurship that very few people consider before they jump in?
Um, I think to me, I think this is going to sound counterintuitive here. I think everybody thinks the fear of failure is the biggest problem, and I don't agree with that. I think the fear of failure is actually a halfway decent motivator. I think people underestimate, to your point of view, throughout this whole conversation so far, I think people underestimate the sheer volume and level of work they're going to have to do when successful, not if. Because all the work you do to get to do if you're trying to be successful, if you're not quite there yet, is expected. You're
Mm.
expected to continue pounding your head against the wall. You're expected to continue running uphill. You're expect no, you're that work is expected of you. When you hit the pinnacle, when you hit the top and you say, now my startup is successful, I think people underestimate how much work there is from that point forward. There's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done after that fact. And I think that I think the fear of success is actually very real. People once people can start seeing the skyline and they go, "Oh crap, if I get to this point, that's in front of me. Oh boy, maybe I'm not sure I want that." And that's what maybe they exit out their company before they hit it, which is fine too, by the way. So you're maybe you don't exit at 200 million or 300, maybe you exit at 2 million and you're
Hmm.
perfectly fine with that because you don't want to do the work. Right?
Hmm.
Like that's just to let you know, people, $2 million if you're in your 20s is not going to last you the
It's
rest of your
not
life.
going to last you the rest of your
Not even
life.
close. Not
It'll
even
it'll
close.
it'll barely last you. Well, it won't even last you through retirement these days.
Exactly.
Um,
So that I think there's a big piece of that that people don't think about.
I remember when I first made my first $100,000. Um, and that was a big milestone for me.
Sure.
Um, and I remember watching the invoice come in where it clicked over right in my bank account, and I sat there and looked at it for about, I don't know, maybe a minute, and I thought, that's interesting. And then I went right back. I went right back to doing the things that I needed to do in order to make the next 100,000 and the next 100,000 and the next 100,000. Right. And I'm a weird entrepreneur because I'm not driven by, or my entrepreneurial mindset is not driven by the normal benchmarks of success
Hmm.
or failure, quite frankly, you know. So I've had the nights where like I've laid awake and like it's Wednesday and I've got to make payroll on Friday and I have no idea how I'm going to cover. I've had that happen, right? More times than I can count. I have had the creditors chasing me around the block and I'm pushing invoices and moving things around,
Rob and Peter to pay
robbing
Paul.
Peter to pay Paul, yeah. I've had the Tom's previous point, I've had to prioritize what are the things that I'm going to do this week or today and trying to figure out without knowing what the answer is, what are the things that are going to produce the most money or that are going to knock down the most dominoes. So by the end of the week, the thing that has to be knocked down gets knocked down. I've done all that. I've done all of that. None of those things. Um, None of those things scared me, but all of those things drive me. Weirdly enough, I found, not weirdly enough, interestingly enough, talking to entrepreneurs, talking to people who are entrepreneurial adjacent, those are the things that scare people.
Hmm.
Those are the things that I remember talking to an employee years and years and years ago. And I was telling him, listen, I haven't taken a check from this company to feed my family in like 3 months. And he was stunned. He's like, I'm getting a check every week. Like, yeah, I know. Because it's important that you get a check every week so you can show up and do the thing. Now, you may ask, well, how are you feeding your family? We don't need to get into all that. I figured out ways to do that. My point is that thing that I had committed to, that thing, and not Peter Thiel, another entrepreneur, has said it this way. I can't remember who, but I was able to stare that thing in the face and not flinch. And I think that's the scariest thing for people. To your point, it's not even success, I wouldn't even say, or failure. It's, can you stare into the abyss of uncertainty day in, day out for multiple weeks and then months and then sometimes years? Can you stare into the abyss of uncertainty and never lose your optimism? And by the way, optimism doesn't mean like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, everything's going to be sunshiny tomorrow. Optimism just means, I used to think this. Actually, I still think this. Not as sharply as I used to because things have changed. But I still get up every morning and I think, okay, nobody alive has lived today. Nobody. Like the next minute that I'm going to be talking, no one's lived in that next minute yet. So there's still all kinds of things that can open up. Just like we're recording this in early March, 2026, right? No one's lived in April of 2026 yet. Not any human being you know. Not one. And actually, I got that idea from a boss of mine who I absolutely despised and had a problem with. But that was one good lesson that he taught me. And when he said it and then he walked it out, I thought, I do not respect any other thing about you, but that is correct. You are correct on that. And so as an entrepreneur, I've been able to channel that into getting up every day and staring into the abyss of uncertainty and doing it for years and being okay. I think somebody with a mindset who is more, shall we say, more of a social reformer or more of an employee, which I think, the statistics are 99% of people will never start a business. They just never will. They'll never start because they can't. They had that expression on their face. I'll never forget it from that employee. Like he looked like he couldn't. It was like I was talking to him in a foreign language. I was talking to him in Chinese at that moment. Like somehow we'd switched from English to Chinese in the conversation. He didn't understand what I was saying. And I think the people who have a mindset of, I have to get paid because my bills have to get paid. If my bills don't get paid, then somehow the world collapses into this ignominy of like lack of status. And I'll be homeless and I don't know, searching for gum underneath benches on the side of the street, like whatever the thing is that people think is a horrible thing, they go right to that. And then the fear of going right to that is what drives them to working for people like me, because the fear of being kicked to the curb and like living in a cardboard box that's not optimal. I wouldn't want that, but it's not scary. That's not the scariest outcome. There's other scary outcomes that are scarier to me than that. And I think that's the distinction with the difference between an entrepreneur mindset and an employee mindset. You know that we have other ways for you to engage with this show, right? We have bonus episodes featuring interviews with interesting guests, working, thinking, and of course, writing at the intersection of leadership and literature. We have shorter episodes, 15 minutes long now, relaunched for this season, featuring introductions of our books and the background of our featured authors, from Augustine to Jane Austen and Ernest Hemingway to Joan Didion. So, listen, subscribe, and check out those other formats, and tell all your friends in leadership and literature about this show.
No, that's true. Like, and I don't disagree with any of that, because I also think like if you take Stephen Covey's theory of beginning with the end in mind, right? Like
Right.
if you look at Stephen Covey's Seven Habits book, and you think of like at the end of your life, and everyone's standing around and talking about your eulogy, what do you want them to say? Do you want them to say like he was a good provider for his family?
Right.
If that's your end goal, then you're right. Stay an employee, get a decent job, and just keep providing for your family at whatever that level is that you feel. Now, at what level do you provide for them? Sure, that like we talked about a few minutes ago, you start at the by the time you retire, you're making six figure, whatever. That's
Hmm.
fine. Again, and if that's your goal, but if the end of the eulogy you want people to be saying things like, my God, he was such a risk taker. He always did like he threw caution to the wind. He wanted like you're probably going to be an entrepreneur. Like
Probably.
you're going to be. But to your point, see, and that's why I did. That's why I don't equate the uncertainty thing. I don't think I view it that same way because to me, the uncertainty doesn't make or break me, right? Like the like
Hmm.
whatever is uncertain. To your point, I'll just go figure it out. Like I've never worried about and by the way, the same to me the same rule applies about just about anything in my life, anything.
Hmm.
So my daughter made an observation of me when she was about 16 or 17 years old. She had asked me a question about a particular sport we were watching. And I was showing her, I was like, no, but if you do this and look at the way they're doing that. And she goes, oh, have you played this sport before? I went, no. She's like, how the hell do you know like about like, and I go, well, because if I don't know, I go learn it. Like education to me does not happen in four walls in some high school or college, university. No, education happens when you seek out knowledge. Seeking out that knowledge is the most important thing. So to me, I've never viewed uncertainty as a problem or a fear because if I don't know it, I'll go figure it out. I'll go find out. I'll go learn it, right? Like, so there's not a lot of problems you can throw at me that will scare me. What I
Right.
think, like I said, in my little spiel on this topic, I would be more fearful of how I would react. One of the projects that you and I are involved in.
Hmm.
If somebody came to us tomorrow and said, "I'll give you guys $500 million for that right now," that would scare me more than uncertainty.
So I would laugh.
No, no, no. I know it's
No,
not
no,
like that.
I would laugh. I would laugh. It wouldn't be as I would laugh, and then I'd be like, where's the other shoe?
Yeah.
But
All right. Again, I know
yes, I know your point. Yeah.
I know that project is not worth that right now. I just
Yeah,
threw out a
yeah.
very large number to
No, no.
just to
It's
throw it
fine.
out.
Yeah.
But my thing would be, okay, so does that mean that we're out? Like we're
Right.
selling it to them? Are we staying in like the fear of that successful conversation, that has more to do with my hesitation than anything else. Because
Interesting.
I would not I'd be nervous to what the rest of the people involved in that project with us.
Yeah.
I'd be more concerned about what they would do
Well,
because I can't dictate what they do.
no, you can't.
I have no control over. That's so your uncertainty, mine is the lack of control.
Control.
Once you get to the success point where you no longer control the outcomes,
Hmm.
that's a problem for me. And
And
I'm
see,
not a
I would
control freak either, by the way. I'm not one of those people that have to control every little detail and every little aspect of every little thing in life. I'm not a control freak. I'm
see,
just
and
saying that that's what would.
well, and I would be like, so first, after I got past the whole like, is this like, am I on candid camera? Like, is there a camera around here somewhere? Like, do I need to be? I need to be worried.
Is Draymond Green to pop out? Sorry.
If he is, I got some words for you too. But after I got past that, my initial thought would be, I don't care about the money. Now, I'm not, this is not from a moral high horse perspective. I want to be very clear. This is not from a moral high horse perspective. If somehow I were able to make off of this thing that we're involved in, if somehow I were able to make, I don't know, 50 to $75 million after taxes, that's for someone like myself in my position, in my life, what I've got going on, that would indeed be at the stage of life I'm at, life-changing money for at least a couple of generations.
For
Nothing to
sure.
sneeze at. I got to be very honest about that. So it's not from a I'm on a moral high horse perspective, right? That's not what I'm talking about at all. The reason I would go to I don't care about the money is because what's way more interesting to me in thinking about the people that are on this project, what's way more interesting to me is the shenanigans that are going to jump off because of that offer. And so
That's what I'm saying.
right. And so for me, the curiosity on that is, wait a minute. So we're not being candy cameraed. Draymond Green isn't going to show up. Okay, that's cool. That's fine. Drew Carey's not going to somehow run around screaming Cleveland rocks or something. Okay. All right. So this is legitimate. Okay. We vetted it. It's a legitimate deal. Now let me watch everybody's around the table, like in those old Westerns where like, it's all like, as my wife would say, it's all just eyes and looking. Everybody's just looking. All of a sudden I start looking around and everybody's seeing who's going to do what, who's going to jump on what. Because for me as an entrepreneur, I go, well, yeah, that's life-changing money. And even if it's not 50 to 75, let's say it's 25 to $30 million. That's still a pretty good chunk of change. I could think of things to do with that. That will last me my entire life. Because I have very small appetites. I live very conservatively.
Same.
My point is, the ways in which people react for me are that abyss. That's what's in the abyss of uncertainty. My master's degree is in conflict resolution and reconciliation and negotiation and all that kind of stuff. And what drew me to all of that was, I am a control freak. I do like to be in charge, particularly when it's stressful. I get more of that, like more of that pops out. And so I've had to really, and I'm not a master of it, ask my wife and kids, but I've had to teach myself to let go of control and be okay with uncertainty in that abyss. And an offer like that creates massive uncertainty. It just does. It creates massive uncertainty. And so the easiest thing is for me anyway, the easiest thing is, because to your point about, well, we haven't really talked about money here, but to your point about entrepreneurs, people associate entrepreneurs with a lot of money because of these big exits and things like that. And the reality is most entrepreneurs wind up broke.
Yeah.
They don't wind up with a huge amount of life-changing money. That is the reason you read about those things in Fortune magazine, or you see them on LinkedIn, or you see them on posts on Facebook or on Instagram or wherever it is you go and look at, is because they are rare. Most entrepreneurs wind up either broke or they barely break even for what they put in on a 10-year project. And by the way, kids, all of you listening, it is 10 years. It is 10 years before you see a dime in profit as an entrepreneur. 10 years to be an overnight success.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and every time you hear the term overnight success, it's crap. There's no such thing.
No such thing.
Every single time you see the words overnight success, it's because you didn't know their name yesterday. You now know it today. So that's overnight. I get that. So overnight success to you, but that doesn't negate the 5, 8, 10 years that they've just put into their blood, sweat, and tears to build to the point where yesterday happened. Like,
right. Well, and that's part of what Sinclair sort of skips over, because the social reformer doesn't put any value on that. Like the first part of Oil, if you read the first few chapters, one of the points that he definitely is trying to build is he's building this character of J. Arnold Ross. He's building him into a character where he invites corruption, right? He's looking for a shortcut. He's resentful that the government is taking his money and not spending it correctly on the roads. He wants to drive as fast as he could possibly drive, and he wants to run over everybody to get to where he's going. He understands the value, to our point earlier about education. He understands the value of education because he wants his son to be educated, but he himself does not need to be educated because he knows everything he needs to know about pulling oil up out of the ground. He is framed as a person who will bribe an official, a local official, not framed. He is a person who will bribe a local official to get a shortcut to make things move. And the local official is the one that is the victim of this bribery, not Mr. Ross of the system that has been created around him that encourages the need for bribery. And so Sinclair definitely takes a position that is in opposition to the entrepreneur. And by the way, I think this is what attracted Paul Thomas Anderson initially to There Will Be Blood, because we've always had a problem in this country with people who build things and have that ruthless vision. We've always had a problem with that. And I think the reason why is it genuinely scares people who, quite frankly, to my point earlier, have to get up and go to work for somebody else. It's to your point earlier that you made about, who do you want at your eulogizing you when you're dead, right? He was a great provider. I think most people are fine with that. I think 99% of the 99% of people who have employee mindset are absolutely fine with the great provider at the end of their lives sort of eulogy. I think the people with that mindset are absolutely stone scared of the person who is ruthlessly focused, like this J. Arnold Ross character, or I'm going to say a few names, or the Mark Zuckerberg type, or the Elon Musk type, or the Henry Ford type, right? Or any of the folks who did build the big oil businesses, the Andrew Carnegie types. I think those people, like Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison, these guys started working when they were 8, 9, 10 years old. They didn't care about school. They were ruthlessly focused on business and making money. And they did not lose the North Star of that because they didn't care about the provider thing at the end of their lives. They cared about, and there's another great scene in There Will Be Blood. I'm going back to the movie here for just a second. There's a great scene where Daniel Day-Lewis is sitting with a man who claims to be his brother, and he's actually a grifter trying to hustle him. But before he finds out that he's a grifter, they're sitting by a fire outside on an oil field. He's pulling oil out of the ground or something like that, or maybe it was a home. I can't remember the specifics of the scene, but Daniel Day-Lewis has this line, and it is the line of the entrepreneur. He says, actually, I should look it up. Because I don't want to miss it. It's actually a really good line. And it defines what entrepreneurship is for the entrepreneur, but it defines it in such a way that it sets it up as being scary and horrific to someone of an employee mindset, right? He says, yep, there it is. There will be blood. Yes, beautiful. Just typed it in and it came right up. Look at you, IMDb. Goose, credits, storyline, taglines, quotes. Here we go. And I'm not getting into, by the way, the religious elements of the book. I'm not getting into the parts about higher education. Some of those are explored in the movie as well. I'm just focusing on the entrepreneurship. This is the variation of it, but it's at the end of his speech. He says basically, there are times there are times when I see people and I see nothing worth liking. I want to earn enough money where I can get away from everyone. I have this thing inside of me that doesn't want other people, and now I'm paraphrasing, but doesn't want other men to succeed. Daniel Day-Lewis says this. And I think that that's the way a person with an employee mindset looks at a person with an entrepreneurship mindset. What they fail to understand is that, and this is the Hollywoodization a little bit of this idea, what they fail to understand is that many entrepreneurs, yes, don't want other folks to succeed, but just as many do want others to succeed. And that's why they're leaders. They want to bring people along. And the challenge they have is other people, I'm going to paraphrase from Michael Jordan in Last Dance, other people don't want to be led. Michael Jordan said most infamously in The Last Dance, he said, was I a horrible, the interviewer asked him, people call you a tyrant, right? And Michael Jordan goes, maybe I was a tyrant. Maybe I was. Maybe I led people where they didn't want to go. Maybe I did get up into them, right? Maybe I did force them to do things that they didn't want to do. But you know what? That's the way I played the game. You don't want to play the game that way? Fine. Don't play it that way. But you're just saying these things because you've never won anything. Yeah. And to Michael Jordan's point, we are a results-oriented society. I've been saying this since college. We can talk all we want about process, and we love to talk about process. The result is what we actually like. This is why Tom Brady, no one's ever going to step over Tom Brady. No one's ever, God bless you, LeBron, no one's ever going to step over Michael Jordan. It's not going to happen. It's just not in my lifetime anyway, because the result is the thing that we value good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. We'll talk a lot all day about process, but the result is the thing that we value, and it's the thing we put money on. And the entrepreneurs produce results, but along the way, they want to hire A players to help produce those results. And when all they see are players from their perspective that aren't A players, they really do struggle with, how do I raise these people up? That's what Steve Jobs struggled with. How do I raise these people up? That's what Michael Jordan struggled with. How do I raise these other players up? Right? So there's a number of different threads that come together here. But at the end of it, I think there is a horror that a person has who comes from that employee mindset when they look at that entrepreneurship mindset, when it's actually laid bare for them.
Yeah. There's also, I think I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot to it as well from a different vantage point. Like, I also think that there's this weird like misnomer that comes with entrepreneurship. Like, people think, oh, you own your own company, you must be wealthy. They
Right.
immediately think that you're in a different like financial status just because you own your own company or you have a, and I'm like, listen, people, that to your point a little while ago, it's not the case. Like, a very good majority of these people are never going to make it. They're not wealthy to
Never.
begin with, and they're not going to be wealthy afterwards. Like, it's not about wealth. It's about building something that you can, be proud of. But to your point about entrepreneurs um not hoping for success for other entrepreneurs, I think in today's landscape, that's actually more likely than not. I think
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs want to see other entrepreneurs win. I think that's a very thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but I think there's a caveat to it. I think they want them to be in different industries than they're in.
Okay, so what you're talking about is the, I call it the it's the thing that happened in the NBA post Kobe. So there's the Michael Jordan era, there's the Kobe era, and now we live in the LeBron era.
Yeah.
And in the LeBron era, everybody's friends, everybody subtweets each other, everybody's friends on Instagram, nobody's trying to dunk on each other. We're all going to be collaborative together. We're all going to high five and jump, and maybe I might beat you by 1 point, whatever. The thing that, and I tell me if I'm wrong, I think it's also happening in entrepreneurship. And I think it's because of the internet and social media has allowed for globalization of this. But
Yeah.
when you are a person who has that Jordan or Kobe level in entrepreneurship, or the the J. Arnold Ross level, Daniel Plainview level of killer instinct, I don't think there's a place for you anymore. I think you get run out of town. I think you get called all kinds of names. I think people accuse you of, to Upton Sinclair's point, bribery, grifting, manipulating the system, whatever. Like, I think so. Mark Zuckerberg's a good example. I look at him and yeah, he's a Weasley guy for sure. And yes, he's a whatever in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's fine. I'm a thing in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Mark can come find me anytime. We can work it out on the mats. Tell Mark where I live. It's fine. Actually, he can find it out anyway. I got a Facebook account. He can find me. Um, I'm not worried about it, because here's the thing. I think Mark has that thing inside of him that Daniel Plainview has. I don't think he likes other people. I don't think he wants to roll in subtweet like LeBron wants to roll in subtweet with everybody and maybe kind of make $100 million business on the side and maybe be a celebrity too. And he's like, he wants to do all these other things and be, no, killer instinct. He doesn't have it. And I know he doesn't have it. And he knows he doesn't have it. Jordan had the killer instinct. Jordan would roll around with John Starks in the off season, and that was fine. They would go gamble in Vegas or whatever. But when it got on the court, he was going to cut your heart out, and then he was going to go to work on you.
It's
And
it's
that's what I see happening in entrepreneurship. Or now maybe I'm
yeah.
wrong.
No, I think you're, like I said, I think you're right to a degree, but again, I think it's like, and we've seen it, right? Like, so you and I have
Mm-hmm.
been judges on pitch competitions
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff like that, right? So, and you're right. It's almost like this, like they're in the room together and they're like, "Oh my God, you did so well. It's good for you." And I'm like, I remember, I'm telling you, my first company, I didn't give a rat's, you know what, about any other, like, no, I wanted to go and succeed, and I didn't care if I stepped over somebody to
Right.
do it. Like, so to your point, I do think it takes a certain type of person to be that person for sure. Like, but and I also think that you're right with the whole globalization of things because the Olympics was a good example of this too. Think
Mm,
about this for a second. The U.S. hockey team just won gold. The U.S. men's hockey team hasn't won gold since 1980. 46 years, they finally won gold again. They come back to the U.S. Now they're back in the NHL. The first time around, players on opposite benches were pulling each other onto the ice to wave to the crowd. Now it's a week later, and they're basically checking each other through the boards. Right? Like, because like they don't care that they were on the same team a week 2 weeks ago. That's all done. Like we
that's
we
all done.
we high-fived each other, we hugged it out, we're good. Now guess what? You have a different color jersey on than I do. I'm gonna knock your teeth out because that's how hockey
Hmm.
is. That's just
Hmm.
but and I think entrepreneurs but again, I think to your point, like that is a good representation of what you're talking about in the entrepreneur landscape right now, where if there's five people in a pitch competition, oh, better yet, and I'm not gonna single out the I can't even say that word because you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. We recently watched a group of entrepreneurs pitch to us that are very kumbaya.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
Okay, they're
Yep.
very kumbaya. And
Yes.
I know for damn certain that there's one or two of those people that should be killers. And if they were killers, they would be successful the day they stepped out of college.
Yep.
Like or the day they stepped out of the environment that they were in or whatever
Hmm.
whatever wherever they are right this minute.
Hmm.
They're going to be successful. They've got to stop the kumbaya BS because if they turn on that killer instinct, there's at least two of them that I think would be wildly successful right out the gate. But they have got to stop looking at their peers as peers and start looking at them as people they can step over to get where they want to go.
So I will tell you that the level of smothering that occurs of that instinct from other people
Yes. Yeah.
is a dynamic that I've experienced myself. So
Yeah.
I'll tell a small story here. 20 some odd years ago, I was in art school. I was not a great artist. It doesn't matter. I went to art school because I loved art. I'd done a few art projects, blah, blah, blah. It's something I've been doing ever since I was like 10, 11, 12 years old. Decided I was going to go to college for it. By the way, I paid for my own school out of my own pocket, didn't take on any loans, whatever. Okay. In art school, I got into so much trouble when I would say to people, and I was a little bit older than all these folks who were like 18, 19 years old, but I would say to them, we're in competition against each other. We're in competition for an A. We're in competition for the professor's attention and good critique. We're in competition for who can put up the best display of our art. And quite frankly, in some cases, we're in competition for who can sell the most art. And do you know what the feedback was that I would get from people? They would say, "Oh, hey, son, you don't understand. We're just all here hanging out." I
We're
remember
building
one,
a community.
we're building a
We're
community.
not in competition with each
We're
other.
not in competition with each other. We can't be in competition with each other. I remember one person who I considered a very dear friend at the time. He said, "Wait, we can't be in competition, man. We're like just," and he was sort of like a little bit like the dude in The Big Lebowski. He was a little bit like that guy. He's like, "Dude, we're just
We're
like
just
hanging out,
vibing.
man. We're just vibing, man." And I learned from that interaction that the people around you smother the instinct.
Mm.
And so you could hold it like I learned from me. I have to hold it like a weapon, right? And I have to figure out where I can deploy it, either to cut those people off, right? Or to, in some cases, like in art school, try to ruthlessly crush them, or to combine it with a talent and skill that they may not possess because they're all kumbaya over here, but I'm going by a different metric. And the close of that story is when I was in art school, I put on my Bachelor of Fine Arts printmaking show. I sold almost every single one of my prints who was in that show. Almost every single one of the other folks who was in that printmaking program struggled to sell a print. And these were all people that said it wasn't a competition and they were just hanging out. And I went, I understand business and you don't. but you just told me it wasn't a competition. You have a good day.
Yeah.
I win.
No,
And I and
I
I
was
and
gonna
I
say,
clear the deck, right? And that's where, and like I've never lost that thing, but I learned, and even through entrepreneurship, I learned like, okay, this is where I have to navigate it, because the smothering from others, once you reveal that, is so intense sometimes that it can almost smother the fire out. It can almost smother the killer instinct out if you don't have it well developed enough.
yeah. Well, or you redirect it into, so there's something to be said on the flip side of this,
Mm-hmm.
that you go from competing to mentoring, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
that's a good use of that creative energy. So you get
Yep.
to a certain point where you're successful enough that you don't need to compete with anybody anymore. But
Right.
now you're going to redirect that same competitiveness goes into your mentorship, which, by the way, so in one of those conversations with that group of people that I was just talking to,
Mm-hmm.
first thing I said to this gentleman was, "I'm not your parent. I'm not your uncle, your brother, your mother. I'm not your family member. I'm not a college professor. My job is not here to go rah rah, you're the best. I'm gonna tell you like it is. I'm gonna tell you what's wrong with your stuff, and if you don't like it, you don't like it."
Order my latest book, 12 Rules for Leaders, The Foundation of Intentional Leadership, co-written with Bradley Madigan. This book offers insights, ideas, and presents a framework for addressing the most pressing leadership challenges in the postmodern leadership landscape we are navigating today. Pick up the paperback, hardcover, or ebook everywhere you buy books, and leave a review on Amazon. And thanks. I
That
would have
person,
appreciated that when I was his age,
oh, he
but
did
I
too,
don't
by
know
the
if,
way.
yeah.
He did too, by the way, at that point, because I think at that point I saw something change in his eye. Like I
Mm-hmm.
saw him go, because I asked him, I said, "So what do you do next? What you do next is the most important decision you're ever going to make. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you decide that what you're building right now is never going to be a company, then what are you doing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
then this conversation is irrelevant unless you really want to make this into something. So
Yeah.
you have to decide, is this real or is it not? Are you playing around with this or are you not? And if you're going to make it real, then you're going to listen to some good advice and you're going to start treating this like it's real."
Do we have to start? So I do believe that instinct, and then we'll move on. We'll sort of close here. I do believe that instinct exists inside of leaders, inside of entrepreneurs. I almost repeat myself there, athletes, but I also believe it exists inside of creatives,
Yeah.
journalists, almost every sort of area of life, modern life, even, or postmodern life, where anyone can either make a buck or gain status or increase their class. There's going to be competition. Now, I think that instinct comes out in a few different places. I think the social smothering is huge, but I think it comes out in different places and in different ways, because that's the human spirit that you can't snuff out. How do we, this is a core question, and this is why I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship in schools, entrepreneurship programs in schools, because we got rid of gym. Vast majority of schools don't have gym anymore.
That is so
Um,
stupid. That is so stupid.
it's nuts. Sports is a whole other kind of thing.
I mean, the
And
NFL even is leaning into flag football. I mean, come on, people. Like,
right,
seriously.
sports is a whole other kind of thing. I mean, I coach my kids soccer team right. Oh, assistant coach my kids soccer team right now, and one of the principles of the organization that the team is under is that everybody plays and everybody has a good time and we don't keep score. And I literally told the director of the program a couple of weeks ago, not literally, I told the director of the program a couple of weeks ago, the kids all keep score. They all know. Who are we fooling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. You're not fooling me. I'm keeping score. You're not fooling them. They're keeping score. Okay. Anyway, we have a globalized society that flattens uh the competitive spirit a little bit into like this weird democratic globalized mash of meaninglessness, right? Where the nail that sticks up sometimes by the algorithm gets pounded down, but then weirdly enough, all the nails are trying to stick up and try to be noticed because everybody wants to be noticed, right? And then, of course, we have the areas where competition has always existed, which is in reproduction, sexual competition, competition between women over men, between men over women. That has not gone away, and that will never go away in our lifetimes. So my question here is, how do we, other than entrepreneurship programs in schools, or bringing back shop and gym, how do we provide opportunities for people at a younger and younger age to access that killer instinct and really, for lack of a better idea, start to separate themselves from other folks? Because right now, athletics is really the only place where that can actually occur. And athletics is even gradually being winnowed down and flattened out.
I don't know. I think there's something to be said about even like, so if you think about, like, if you think of the stories of like Mark Cuban and guys like
Mm-hmm.
that who, like, listen, I was an entrepreneur at 12 years or 10 years old. Like, I went out and got a paper route, and when I figured out I could get, like, deliver more papers by talking my buddy into doing one street for me, and I'll give him, you know what I mean? Like, so, like, but to your point, there's no way to encourage that, right? Like, there's no way, like, and I by the way, I still firmly believe in a very old statement that necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so if you find, again, I think, to your point about the globalization and the socializing, we socialize our problems now too, right? So
Yeah.
poor people are universally poor. So we're not now, like, we're and by the way, I know this from experience because I grew up very poor. So, like, but when I was a kid, nobody paid attention to the poor neighborhoods. Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Ex
Mm-hmm.
Except the police departments for all the wrong reasons. But that, we won't get into that. But nobody cared. Like, nobody took interest in ideas coming from those poor neighborhoods or any. But now even the poor neighborhoods have social media, so you could turn yourself into an influencer in your bedroom of a studio apartment that six people are living in. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
we're globalizing and socializing even that part of our lives. So it's very, I think it's very difficult to find those needles in the haystack, because to your point about, not every entrepreneur is going to be successful. Not every idea is going to be the next Facebook. Not every, like, you have to nurture those types of ideas. So do we start looking at them through different lenses? Like, meaning, like, so we're not going to look at that kid in school that just had a science fair project that could actually be a product on the market if somebody actually paid attention to it. No, we're going
Mm-hmm.
to wait until he becomes an influencer and then see him creating some garbage online that we go, oh, wait a minute, that kid's got a, like, I don't.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Some of this is broken. I
Yeah.
certainly don't know the answer to it, because if I did, I'd be the next Facebook. Like, I would have already turned on the spigot. Like, I would have already turned on the spigot if I knew how to answer that question. But I do agree with you that it 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 there are some new there's new ways of that we're trying to globalize this, that makes it very tough for people to get
Does.
that competitiveness. And to your point about, I, I I tried really hard with my kids to get that competitiveness, because, just so you know, I was not that guy. Like, I was not that dad to, like, okay, shoot the basketball, honey. Oh my God, look at, oh, you won. No, no, no. If you're gonna beat me, you're gonna beat me, and it's gonna be legit. Which is why, by the way, so when I taught my daughter how to play chess, like, out of my five kids, my daughter was the only one that enjoyed playing chess.
Mm-hmm.
She has a competitiveness to her that is, and I hate to, I know that you and I are both competitive. I'm telling you that
Mm-hmm.
she would take both of our competitiveness and just crush them.
Mm-hmm.
She would crush them. She's way more competitive than any human being I've ever seen in my entire life. She would sit and play hours, chess game after chess game after chess game, because I would beat her, and I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't I wouldn't let her win ever.
Yeah.
I would beat her every time because I felt like it was going to improve her chess game. So if
Right.
she would, so the handful of times that she beats me,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the world is, like, opening up her. It's like the world is her oyster, and she can. It's like she accelerates that joy, like,
Yeah.
not accelerate, sorry, exacerbates that
Mm-hmm.
joy,
Yeah.
like it's. like she just hit the lottery. But I, I can't do that with a kid down the street that I don't know that like that you're trying
Right.
to encourage entrepreneurship to.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
just can't do that, right? Like you now I will say though, I remember when I was a kid, strangers weren't dangerous. I could
Hmm.
walk if there was a guy, and by the way, the way I learned how to play chess, being in the neighborhood that I was in, being a very poor neighborhood, we used to go down the street into a little bit wealthier neighborhood. And there was always a guy there. They had these like park benches, park like
Hmm.
tables, like that had chessboards on them already. They were built in to the
Oh, that's
chess
awesome.
into the
Yeah.
neighborhood. And
That's
this
awesome.
guy would sit there and play chess with anybody who wanted to play chess with. So I would go and I would tell him I don't know how to play chess, and he taught me how to play chess. Now, by the way, same thing. His rule, he was a I found out much later in life that guy was like a grandmaster, like chess went like he won chess competitions around the world. Like this guy was
Hmm.
really incredible. He could beat somebody in chess with 5 moves. Five, no doubt. Like he would sit there and he'd ask, "Are you a chess player, novelty, or do you know?" And if you said, "No, no, no, I'm a chess player. I enter chess competitions," he'd go, "Okay, on." He would beat that person in 5 to 6, like no doubt. I was like, I would watch this and go, "What just happened? What just happened?" Like, so anyway, but if you sat down with him and said, "Listen, I'm a beginner. I don't know
Hmm.
chess very well," different story. His
Right.
competitive, like I talked about a few minutes ago, his competitiveness went away because his mentor side came
Came
out.
out. Yeah.
He
Came out.
wanted to be a mentor. Now, he again would not just quote unquote let you win, but he would play as if he was a novice so that you could
Right.
play on equal playing ground so that you could learn.
He would ratchet it down.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, 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 yes. And I think that that's part of the key to all of this, right? So if you're a leader and you have that competitiveness and you've built this business and you started from nothing, and by the way, to Tom's point earlier, most entrepreneurs start from nothing. It is the
Yeah.
very rare entrepreneur that gets gifted, $100 million by their daddy. That is not a normal story. Most people start from like I did, $500, and I'm into my last $500, and I guess I got to do something. So like, let's go. Most people start like that, and then build something over the course of time. Um, but I think if you're a leader, it's you have to understand innately how to ratchet that down and how to ratchet that up. And I think that's at the core of what you're saying. I also think that I mean, the closest analogy I can have is to a martial arts master, right? Like a person who's, and I'm not going to use the term black belt, a person who is an advanced practitioner in any kind of martial art, whether it's boxing, all the way to jujitsu, karate, all the way to Tai Chi. I don't care what they're doing, right? A person comes in who's a beginner, they're not going to, if they know anything about how to handle their killer instinct, they're not going to manhandle that person. They're just not.
Can I tell you a very, very quick story about the
Yeah, go
chess?
ahead.
So
Yeah,
I one of my favorite things. I don't know. I would not consider myself an expert because of my definition of expert, but
sure.
I can spin chucks really, really well.
Okay.
And the
You don't
first
hit yourself in
time
the face.
first time somebody ever came to me and was like, "Oh, I could do that." I was like, "Here you go." And then just watched them beat the ever-loving crap out of themselves. And I said nothing.
Nothing.
And I was like, that is not a very good mentor. Or is it? Like, to your point,
Well,
like,
I
because there
mean,
are there are some lessons that I feel like you need to learn on your own. And one of the lessons you need to learn on your own is that just because to your point, just because you see somebody swing those things and do it really, really well,
so I think the thing
watching
you
it and doing it are two different things. And
so I
you have to start at step one. You can't just swing them. You have to learn how to like how they move, what they do, you have to learn how they hurt before you can learn how to swing
well,
them really well.
okay, so this goes back to what you were saying earlier in our conversation as we wrap up here about your kids, right? They want to start with the master's degree and go
Yeah.
directly to the $100,000 job. They don't want to do the things like with the nunchucks. They don't want to get hit in the face because getting hit in the face sucks,
Yeah, getting the face
except
hurts.
right. Except getting hit in the face, maybe not physically, as the comedian Mark Maron would say. It's all going to be thinky pain now. It's all going to be pain in your body, right? Or pain in your mind. Like you're done with the physical pain part. Now you're going to go into thinky pain,
Yeah.
psychological pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. Nobody wants to go through that, right? They'd rather skip all the pain parts. And what a good mentor does is a good leader who's a good mentor, they give good analysis at the beginning and they see the difference between someone who maybe can come in and experience that thinky pain and maybe in some cases physical pain, like the nunchucks. They see the difference between that person who's willing to go on that path and the person who, to your point, is just arrogantly coming in thinking they can do something. Like we've seen this with entrepreneurship. We've seen this with businesses.
Yeah. You want to know a really good experiment to figure this out? Take one of the most complicated subject matters you can think of. Theoretical physics, space travel, I don't care. Whatever you think is difficult to understand. Put it in ChatGPT and then prompt it to say, tell me this like I'm a 5-year-old, and watch what ChatGPT spits back to you. Because to your point, that's where you're starting, people. If you're trying to be a mentor to somebody, you have to assume they know nothing.
Right.
You have to give them the basics and the foundation before you can start, throwing master classes at them.
Well, and you also have to sometimes you have to, and now I will go specifically into jiu-jitsu. Sometimes you have to humble the arrogant.
Of course, yes.
Sometimes you do. Like, we have people, it happens in our tiny little school, in my tiny little town that I live in Texas, right? We will have people who walk into that school and they will say, sometimes with their mouths, but most often with their body language, oh, well, that crap doesn't work on me. Blah, 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 blah. Or I love this one. I'll just see red, bro, and go in a fight. And I'm thinking of a few months ago, someone came in for a trial class, and I've been doing this for a minute. And my instructor was like, you go ahead, you go with the new guy, right? And I always ask new people, like, what's your background? Like, do you have any experience doing this before I get into anything with them, right? Just to test and see, to your point about the nunchucks, who am I dealing with? Am I dealing with someone who wants to just hit themselves in the face all the time? Because I'll accommodate you. That's fine. Or am I dealing with somebody who genuinely wants to learn? And this person was not genuinely interested in learning. And so when it came time so we did our drills or our moves or whatever, it was fine. Move of the night. And then we're gonna actually put it into practice. We're gonna roll, we're gonna wrestle, right? Polhada, which is Portuguese for fighting with intent, right? So fighting with intent is different than fighting without intent, right? Fighting without intent is what you see on 99% of the videos that you see on Twitter of people getting jacked, or getting surprised or getting ambushed. It's what Tom has experienced in his life. I've experienced in my life when you get into a brawl. It's all of that, right? That's without intent. The people with the haymakers flying and all that kind of good stuff, right? When you roll with intent, though, none of that factors in.
Right.
Now, if you don't have intent, but I do have intent, I'm going to beat you every single time. This is not pride or arrogance. You have no intent. You're just out there doing stuff. I know enough, and I'm not even close to mastery. Not even close. I'm on talk about 10 years of being an overnight success. It takes 10 years to get a jiu-jitsu black belt at minimum. Most of the time in America, it takes people between 12 and 15 years at my age. Going to be going a long time. I'm all the way at the beginning of the journey. This is not a pride thing. This is just a fact. If you are engaging with me without intent, I'm going to maul you. I'm just going to maul you. And I'm not even going to really sweat that hard. And so like the person came in and he starts, I was like, okay, I put a bully grip on him. Like when you were a kid and they were like, give me my money. Like they grabbed your collar or whatever. And I put a bully grip on him and I watched his eyes shift. And I went, oh, okay. He has no intent now because he's panicking. And he did. He started like lashing out and going around. And I just moved around him and did my thing. And all I was doing was playing defense. And I looked over at my instructor and he was laughing. He's been with me a while. I've been with him a while. And he started laughing. And I was like, can I just go? And I did. I looked at him. Can I just go? I raised my eyebrow. Can I just go? And he goes, yeah, go ahead. And so like I wrapped him up. Wrapped the guy up. Guy's flailing around. I wrapped him up. I didn't even submit him. I didn't even put like a choke on him. I didn't knock him out or anything. I just put him on the ground. I was like, you got to calm down. Like you're flapping all over the place. You have to stop. You have to stop. That's with intent. And by the way, this is not a small dude either. This can be applied to leadership. Are you leading with intent? Are you doing it in an intentional kind of way? Are you doing your entrepreneurship with intent? And when we talk about getting that killer instinct, are you using that killer instinct with intent? Or is it just like a weapon you're just waving around like your nunchucks? So you got to hit yourself in the face. And then a bunch of people are going to laugh at you. It's been a good conversation. I didn't know what we were going to pull out of Sinclair. I will say to everybody who's listening, this is a 575 page book. I have covered maybe the first 120 pages of it. So we will be back with Sinclair. I will have a follow up to this episode. We'll talk a little bit more about it after I do a little bit more of a deep dive into it. Go watch the movie There Will Be Blood. It's a great example of entrepreneurship. From
and
beginning
the movie,
to end.
by the way, is based on probably about the first 100 pages too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a very small chunk of it because there's so many other dynamic.
A very small chunk of the book that is a 2.5 hour movie.
There's a 2.5 hour movie that should tell you something about Sinclair's writing. Again, a guy who was also playing for keeps, by the way, on the work. Yeah. Tom, final thoughts. How can we integrate all these lessons together for leaders? What's our final thoughts here?
Well, I think you pretty much summed it up, just a couple of seconds ago. I think the difference between a leader, a true leader, and somebody who just wants to, as you put it in your jujitsu example of just going, a true leader wants to bring people with them, right? A true leader wants to elevate everybody else around them, and the only way you do that is to meet them where they are and help them get better, not push them down and just suppress them. The killer instinct is different in those cases, right? Mm-hmm. So you need the killer instinct to get yourself there, but once you're there, you need to kind of suppress it a little bit and use the killer instinct to elevate everybody else around you. Instill that killer instinct around the people that you in the people that are around you. So I think that's the other. There's a phrase in the medical field, I'm not in the medical field, so I'm not gonna get it 100% right, but I know it's something to the effect of like, learn about it, watch it, do it, teach it, right? Like, so taking what you're learning in a book, seeing it in practice, and then trying it in practice, and then teaching it in practice. That's how you elevate everybody around you. And being humble enough to start at the beginning multiple times, I think that's also important because nobody knows everything, right? Nobody knows it all. So again, so you and I have talked about martial arts a lot in our friendship. I didn't take Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was a Jeet Kune Do guy. If I walked onto a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mat right now, regardless of how much I knew about Jeet Kune Do, I would feel humbled by the art form. I would want to be taught. So that even knowing what I know with Jeet Kune Do, I would not be that guy that you experienced on the mat.
Right.
There's no way I would be. My intent would be to learn. I'm new here. I'm the new guy. I don't give a shit what I came to I don't care what I come to the mat with. I don't know your art form. I want to learn it from a perspective of teaching me, not what that guy experienced, which was basically humility. Like you had to teach him humility. You're not going to teach me humility. I think that's the difference between somebody who is, I'll put it this way. I feel like if I chose to go learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu right now, I would eventually be a leader in that dojo.
Yeah.
Because I know myself. I know I would start at the bottom. I know I would want to learn from the best. I know that I know I would elevate myself eventually to being good at what that art form was. But ultimately, my goal would be to then teach people how to be that good. And to exactly what you would did with that guy, teach them the humility of it. Because I hate to say it, but no matter how good the Western world and Western philosophies are, well, I guess Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is kind of Western, but the martial arts art forms come from the East. All
Hmm.
of them, the foundations are all in the East. It doesn't matter which one you are in, you're practicing right now. But they it's all foundational, right? And it's no matter how many times you go back, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. Like, and I think people lose that. Like, I think people like I can't even count how many times in my career somebody has said to me, and by the way, I've been sales manager, I've been a VP of sales, et cetera, right? So I was a sales manager at the time, and I went to interview for another sales manager job, and they basically said to me, "You don't know this industry well enough to be a sales manager. We're going to start you back as a sales rep, and then if you work out, then we'll put you as a sales manager." I did that like 3 times until finally I was like, "I'm not doing that anymore. Like,
Hmm.
I'm gonna go do my own thing because
Hmm.
I'm not gonna start at the bottom and work my way up in the same the, the examples are different. The martial arts example is exactly that's a perfect example of it's completely different, right? The art
Hmm.
forms are completely different. To
Yeah.
me, sales is sales.
Sales. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm selling a phone or I'm selling this mouse, like my computer mouse or my phone. To be it doesn't I don't care
Doesn't
what
matter.
this product is. Sales are sales and people are people. So I was I was done doing that. But what I did learn throughout that process is exactly what I'm talking about. Taking that step back and then taking that role, I learned that the people I wanted working for me had to be people that were willing to learn. They had to be people willing. I would hire guys that have been in sales, like not management, but I've been a sales rep for 20 years. I just want to be a sales rep. I never want to be anything more than a sales rep, but I'm going to go from product to product to better myself in finances or whatever, right? And I would interview a guy that's been in sales for 20 years. And the only thing I cared about was he teachable? Was he stuck in his own ways or her own ways? Were they stuck in a philosophy of sales that I couldn't break? And if the answer was yes, I didn't hire them. I don't care if been in sales for 5 years or 50 years. It didn't matter. What mattered to me was, are you open-minded enough to listen and learn and be, and then by the way, if you do and I put a new sales rep with you, can you teach them? Like, can
Hmm.
I pair a new sales rep with you so you can teach them? Those are the two things I cared about. Can you learn and can you teach? That's it. And I think in that that's a good I think that's a good overall kind of turn to what we're talking about today, even from entrepreneurs. You have to have the killer instinct, yes, but you have to be willing to be taught and you have to be willing to teach. If you're not willing to be taught and willing to teach, then you're probably not going to be successful at it.
That's a good spot to stop. So I'd like to thank Tom Libby for coming on the show today once again in our Wild West ranging conversation around oil by Upton Sinclair. Go ahead and pick up that book. And with that, well, we're out.